This is a Viva PR podcast.
We don't have as many opportunities as some of our friends do in London. We have to really hustle. If you're loud and, out there, then that means you must have plenty of confidence. And those are the folks I would say have the least amount of confidence. The word inclusion, diversity, equity has been weaponised under the banner of meritocracy. We're very good at selling other people, but when it comes to being our own spokesperson, we're terrible.
Hello and welcome to PR in the Real World, the show that cuts through the noise and highlights real-world impact from the PR and comms front lines, with me, Tony Garner. As an experienced practitioner, the founder of internal comms agency CommsRebel, CIPR president, and a fighter for inclusivity and a northerner to boot, Advita Patel really pretty much is the ideal PR in the Real World guest. In this episode, Advita discusses the truth about agency life, the importance of inclusivity and how the industry still have some catching up to do, and why confidence is a must in PR and comms professionals. If you work in the industry and want to shake things up or just need a bit of inspiration, this one's for you. Shall we crack on? So, Advita, welcome to Rottenstall. Can we start at the beginning and I'll ask you to tell me a little bit about how you got started in PR and comms and what drew you into it in the first instance.
Yeah, great question. I actually studied information tech at university and wasn't familiar with communications or PR. Actually, I had this ambition to be the female version of Bill Gates. I was obsessed with technology ever since. I know, what an ambition. My dad brought. I know, not bad.
Up nice and high. There.
I know, but I remember my dad bringing home our first kind of PC and the modem. In those days, it was just showing off my age now, and just this world opening up, and I thought, God, technology is incredible. I was chatting to folks like on MSN Messenger, if people can remember that, in like San Francisco and California and Australia, and I absolutely love tech. So I went and studied tech at university and learned how to code, how to build computers, all of that kind of stuff. And as soon as I graduated, and I decided to focus my energies on web development, but as soon as I graduated, there's a massive dot-com crash, if you remember that, in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I just could not get a job in information tech anywhere. Like, I was struggling. I ended up defining a role, hated it, absolutely hated it. Was actually bullied in that job, which I didn't really know I was being bullied because my parents didn't come from an office background. Right. So I never really was brought up with politics of office, CFO, CEO, MDs, behaviours, office etiquette. And I just thought this is just what office life must be like. So I ended up quitting in the end. My mum and dad were like, what on earth is going on with you? Yeah. Just like, you're not the same person as you were. And I said, I hate my job. And they were like, just leave. I was like, what, just leave? And they were like, yeah, quit.
Wow.
And I think I needed that validation and permission to quit. Yeah. So I handed my notice in and then went off and got a job in a university, Manchester Met, actually. And I worked in the admissions team where I was helping students get places in hospitality programs. Mm-hmm. And while I was doing that job, the marketing manager, Catherine, needed help with her job because she was part-time and her part-time person was off sick or something, I can't remember. But she invited me along to an event with students. And I was a bit apprehensive because I just left this quite toxic environment. I wasn't quite sure what the hell Catherine wanted and why she was asking me all these questions. But she was quite curious about me. And she was asking me about, what do I love about the work that I do? And I didn't really have any answers, Tony. I was a bit like, I don't know. It's a job. It just brings me money. And then she actually mentored me. And I would say she was probably now, looking back in, 20 odd years ago, she was probably my first ally. Yeah. Somebody who really cared about me and sponsored me a lot in that role and gave me opportunities that I didn't think I needed. So she encouraged me to do a master's in strategic marketing and actually got the university to part fund me on that as well. So I did it part-time while working full-time and ended up just working in marketing initially, and then I got on a role as a marketing officer in an organisation and quite realised it wasn't marketing, it was communications. Right. And the rest is history. But it was all down to the wonderful Catherine, actually, who guided me.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. We all need those kind of guardian angel figures, don't we? That come in, and we don't really realise at the time that we might not even need them.
No.
You mentioned before we started recording that you, like me, grew up in Bolton, and I was interested in your family background and how you think that shaped you as a comms person and as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I love the North, and I'm so proud of my Lancashire roots and, growing up in Bolton and then later moving to Manchester. And one thing growing up in the kind of northern regions of England is resilience. Yeah. We don't have as many opportunities as some of our friends and colleagues do in London. We have to really hustle for our worth here and to be seen and be recognised. And pre-pandemic, now I would say the world is a bit more open for collaboration and connection, and you can get involved in projects and stuff that you may not have had the opportunity to do so before. But in the early days, I remember having to get on that train to London to take part in anything because nobody dared come up to Manchester to do anything. Yeah. And growing up in a small town it's a big town actually, isn't it, Bolton? But growing up in Bolton and then later moving to Manchester definitely taught me the art of navigating complex kind of relationships. And as I said before, my mum and dad didn't work in an office. They both owned a shop. And worked 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So my sister and I were left on our own majority of the time. And unfortunately, when we moved to Manchester, we ended up moving to quite a racist part of Manchester, which was the first time, because Bolton's very... what's the word I'm looking for? Like quite the demographics in Bolton is there's all sorts of different...
It's quite a nice mix, isn't it?
It's a nice mix.
A melting pot.
Yeah, it's a nice mix. You've got different parts of Bolton, and depending where you are, when you walk through the town centre, you see different cultures, different religions, races. And the part we moved to in Manchester wasn't like that. And we were the only Asian family, but definitely, I think we're the only Asian family, but actually the only family of colour in the entire town. And boy, did they tell us that we didn't belong in that space. And because we were left alone, me and my sister, for a long time, we had to learn how to really reach and understand our worth, because we were being told on a regular basis that we weren't welcome and we should really go off back to where we came from. And I remember kind of saying to these group of lads, like, what, Bolton? Which is because it was so foreign to me. Like, we're going back to where? Yeah. My mum's from Kenya, my dad's from India. They both moved over in the late 70s. My mum moved over in the early 70s, my dad in the late 70s. And I hadn't even visited those two parts at that time. So I kept going, why go back to Bolton? Why do you want me to go back to Bolton? So what's going on? But that did teach me, it teaches you resilience. It teaches you self-value and self-worth. You have to... It is that chin up, stiff upper lip, crack on. My mum and dad refused to be chased out as well. So they were like, we're not getting chased out. We don't belong. We're gonna stay here and we're going to manage this. And they do say now to both me and my sister, it was easy for us to say that because we weren't there. Yeah. But you were the two that were obviously managing these kind of thugs around that. But it did teach me a lot. And I said to you before we went off the mic that I am so proud of my northern roots. That I remember folks giving me advice about moving to London to progress in my career, and I was like, absolutely not. No. I'm not. No, I don't begrudge anyone that went down there, and good on you for kind of making that move. But my family, my friends, my life, everything was up here, and I didn't want to relocate for a job. No,
that's really interesting. So. You've been involved with the CIPR for 15 years, or more, and now you're the president. Yeah. What motivated you in the first instance to get involved with the organisation, but then more latterly to take on, what is a key role?
Yeah. Well, I got involved in CIPR because I felt quite alone. It's quite lonely, and that's one of the challenges of in those days when we were up here, there wasn't as much networks as they are today. Yeah. And I didn't really know what direction to go in. And I worked for the NHS at the time, and there just wasn't any budget for training and development. And I thought, if I want to progress in my career, I need to expand my networks a bit further than what I've got currently. So I remember my friend Gemma saying to me, why don't you come with me to the AGM in London? We'll get the 4:15 train and we'll be there by 6:30. I mean, if the trains are running on time, of course. Thankfully, that day they were. So we ended up just jumping on the train with her, went to the AGM, and they were asking for volunteers, and I put my hand up. Just, I don't know what possessed me, because I wasn't in that kind of space at that time. But I went, yeah, go on, I'll do it. What I didn't realise at the time, that it did involve going down every month to take part in the committee meetings. But I loved it. Right. I met so many different individuals, and I got involved in so many different projects, learned so much. And I've met my best friends through CIPR. And over the 15 years, it completely changed my life. And I wouldn't be here talking to you or running my own businesses if it wasn't for CIPR. I love the fact that it had this quite the pathway of continuing professional development, you know, the portal and stuff. And it's got its faults. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's stuff in there that I just would never have had access to if I wasn't a member or a volunteer. And like I said, you know, I met my best mates through CIPR. And I got to a point after volunteering for 15 years, and I thought, you know what, I want to give back. Right. I want to give back, and I want to celebrate and recognise that you can put yourself out there, even if you're not London-centric, and even if you don't fit into the dominant culture of what CIPR was. And one thing that really pushed me, actually, Tony, was somebody said to me, do you know, like in the 75-year history of CIPR, there's never been a person of colour who's been a president? Right. And I was like, whoa, really? And I had to go back to have a look, and it was the truth. And I thought, you have to be, I live by the rule of you have to be the change that you want to see. And I had the privilege at the time to put myself forward for presidents, because I worked for myself. I didn't really have to answer to anyone. Yeah. I built up great relationships with CIPR. I knew what to expect and what not to expect. And I felt if anyone was going to break that mould, I was probably in the better position to do so. So, yeah, that's how I ended up being the president. Excellent.
Just, I mean, for the wider listeners, what does the role entail?
Well, this year it's different from the usual presidency, because it's the first year we've got our independent chair, Maria Miller, who is responsible for the board, the strategic direction of the board. So it's a little bit different. Normally it was a president that would run everything in that sense. But what they realised, and I think some of the feedback we received from the membership, was it wasn't consistent with different presidents coming in, because the president role is for a year. Yeah. And then you're president-elect, president, and then past president. But when the new president comes in, they want to make their mark, right? As you can imagine, which didn't help the institution, because it meant that it kind of went up and down depending on what the president's appetite was. Yes. And it's not beneficial for the long-term gain of the institution. So a decision was made a couple of years ago to put in a bit of a structure and a governance process. So there's continuing kind of consistency around deliverables, rather than the president's kind of appetite or what they believe it should be. So it's the first year, we're 3 months in with Maria, so I've taken on that role to kind of define what is the president's role. And I look at presidency as the voice of the membership. Yeah. You know, we're the ones who are representing the membership, advocating for the profession, making sure that our members are heard and listened to, and we're delivering the right things. And Maria's job as the independent chair is to make sure that the board are aligning with the deliverables that we've set, to make sure that we're bringing the best member value to the institution, and we can continue the growth that we want to grow.
Sounds a sensible plan. Now, historically, the PR industry has been, at least regarded from the outside looking in, as very London-centric. How do you think that's impacted on the professionals working in the regions, and how do you feel now that you've got your president's hat on? Is there any levers that you can pull to make any changes?
One of my big things when I decided to put myself forward for presidency was to look at this regional element. And we are much better than what we were when I joined 15 years ago. You know, we've got better with more regional presence. We're not there yet, though. And it's still very London-centric. And then the reason for that is because majority of our members do tend to be in London and the surrounding boroughs of London. And I recognise that. You know, we always look at the data set. Where's the needs? Where do people want to go? And it is around that space. But one of the pushbacks or challenges, I suppose, I always give to the centre is to understand there are some really smart individuals and agencies who are doing fantastic work that deserve the recognition and deserve the opportunity. And why should we be out of pocket to attend an event down in London. I was just saying to a colleague of mine that every conference that we go to in London, it's not the ticket price, right? It's a train ticket, and it's a hotel cost, and it's a day out for us.
Yeah.
You know, I've met peers of mine at conference in London who were like, oh, I've just popped in for a couple of hours in between meetings. And they paid 250 quid or 400 quid for the ticket. And I'm there £1,000 down. Because I've had to trek all the way to London for an event. So I'm trying to get folks to think a little bit more creatively about how do you create training opportunities or learning opportunities that is inclusive for folks who are not just London-centric. And also people, you know, even in London, don't often travel into the centre anymore. No. So how do we do things like, how do we use hybrid technology better? Because the excuses I always get is that it doesn't work. Well, why does it not work?
Yeah.
Like, we're obviously doing something wrong if it doesn't work, because we should give that opportunity to bring in more hybrid opportunities. So people should be able to log on and watch from wherever they are, or attend in person if they want to. And I've seen reluctance, I would say, and reasons which I understand to an extent. But like I said to you earlier, if you don't change, you don't know. Like, you've got to give these things a bit of a go and ask the questions and stuff. And to give, you know, CIPR credit, they are open for conversation and discussion about what is it that they want to do. And they'll say to me like, oh, we tried it in 2016. Well, 2016 was only 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Life has changed since then. Let's give it another bash.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. And if we don't get the appetite for doing a chartered day in Manchester, for example, then fine.
Yeah.
At least we can then say, look, we didn't get the appetite, we didn't get the... I'm not saying we do something every month, we do something every 6 months maybe, so you can get the list up there and stuff. But I'm just trying to get them to think a little bit differently. And the great thing is they are open to suggestions and ideas.
So what changes might we see? I'm going to hold you like forever for this, but, you know, but what would you like to see if you had a...
I want to see more regional events, and I think our groups do a great job, to be honest, but I want to see more opportunities for chartership in person. All of it's online at the moment, and there's reasons for that. But I think, you know, 5 years, you know, it's been 5 years, I would say, since we've been playing around after the pandemic. Well, 3 years, I suppose, isn't it? And people are craving that in-person connection again. So I'd like to see more opportunities for folks to have choices.
Yeah.
Do I want to do it online? Or do I want to do it in person? If I want to do it in person, can I do it in my local region?
Yeah.
Or do I have to trek all the way down to London and do it? And I think we need to be fair, and we need to give people opportunities to decide what works well for them. Some people don't do very well online, and some people do brilliantly in person, and vice versa. So I want to see more opportunities and choices for individuals, especially for things like chartership, which is a whole day with your peers, you know, spending time together to understand your key areas of strengths and looking at those three: ethics, leadership and strategy, right? We look at. And then I also want to see more training and development as well around, you know, so we don't have to go again to a training centre down in London. We should be able to go to a training centre in the regions that we live in. But I do appreciate that we have to look at the data set. We're a commercial business, even though it's every bit of money gets reinvested back into the institution. We're still commercial and we still have to be sustainable. But I'm always about, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. Let's chance it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then we'll try something a bit different. But you don't know until you tried it.
It's great to have a Northern champion in the room fighting our corner.
Yeah,
anyway.
always.
So let's change gear a little bit. When we were talking earlier, you were talking about confidence is one of the things that you kind of talk about a lot and bring in your own work. And it's kind of a huge issue in our industry. Why do you think comms professionals struggle with confidence, particularly when they're making that kind of step up from doing the do to having that strategic voice in the room? Yeah.
I mean, if you think about our role in organisations, the one we're supporting client, we're always highlighting our client, aren't we? What is our client? What are they, you know, what do we need to do for them, or the organisation that we're in? And if you're in-house, you're often fighting for your value, I would say. And even when you own an agency, you know, when you're trying to win a client over and you pitch into the client, you're often contending against other agencies or, you know, other proposals. So you're kind of putting it all in there. And then when you do finally win that pitch, you feel that you have to then go sometimes over service our clients to retain them, because the world that we're in right now is quite complicated and difficult, and the economy isn't where it needs to be. And that, I've noticed, has started to knock the confidence of individuals when they are trying to sell their services or trying to sell a pitch or trying to sell a campaign or trying to persuade and influence leaders in organisations, because we're so busy waiting for that validation and permission, and it doesn't always come, which I think really knocks our confidence as communication professionals in terms of they haven't congratulated me on this, or they haven't said well done about that, or they're not giving me a voice in this room. So I believe that they may not like what I'm saying or doing, so I'm just going to try and keep my head down and not really make too much of a fuss. And I've seen over time, especially as you said, as you progress in your career, people aren't comfortable in selling themselves very well. We're very good at selling other people, and we're very good at training other folks to speak up and say what they need to do or be the spokesperson. But when it comes to being our own spokesperson, we're terrible. Shockingly terrible, in fact. And we just feel, when I speak to others in the comms world, they feel very uncomfortable about it. It's really uncomfortable. Is that not egotistical? I don't want to be the spotlight or highlight what I'm doing. But I'm like, it's similar to awards, right? Like, if you're entering awards, then be proud of that and celebrate that and recognise it, whether you win or not. The fact is, you've got something to celebrate and recognise. But confidence does dip over time. And I think if you don't get the opportunities, or you get rejected for a role, or you get rejected from a proposal, it's like a little notch that just kind of keeps knocking you. And if you don't manage that well, you're going to kind of lose your sense on where you're going and what direction you're going in as well. No,
it is tricky. And I guess it goes right through to those kind of conversations. Have you got the confidence to have the conversation to say no when you met with all the can you justs? Can you just for work and things that might be outside of scope, and like you've got a little voice in your head saying, the boss said we don't want to lose this client. And, you know,
things are tough out there. You should be lucky you got this job. You know, look how hard it is for everybody else out there. And you hear it, right? You hear it. Like, if you look at LinkedIn right now, the number of comms folks looking for opportunities is more than I've seen in a long time. And it's, especially as the more senior you're getting in your career, it's tough. You know, it's really tough out there. And if you put in other kind of, you know, depending on where you live, your location, your family circumstances, all of that plays a part in whether you're going to get that opportunity or not. So you end up starting, like I said, starting to overservice, starting to become this kind of comms chameleon. I can do anything you need me to do as long as you give me the opportunity. And you lose yourself in all of that, which over time you lose your identity and you forget what you're there to do and what your purpose is, because you've listened to so many other narratives so you can belong in that space.
It strikes a chord what you're saying there. Tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, Decoding Confidence.
So it's based from in 2018, I went through what can only be described as a huge confidence spiral. I was going to leave the profession. I had that kind of worry about, am I in the right job? Should I be working in PR and communications? And I really struggled with my confidence and self-esteem, to the extent where I was actually walking through Tesco and I was like, God, that woman looks so content stacking that shelf. Right. That's something that I could do. God, how easy would that be to just kind of be like, right, I'm just going to go and work in Tesco or Waitrose for a while I figure my life out. And I remember talking to a friend of mine while I was driving to work. And I must have been like raging or ranting for at least 40 minutes about how unfair everything was. And it was because, again, it was that career development, moving on to my next step, and I didn't get the opportunity. And I just put it all on me. Like, it was me, I'm rubbish, I'm obviously don't deserve the opportunity, I'm just going to be stuck here all my life. And I remember after about 40 minutes, I was like, hello. I thought she got cut off on the M60. Hello, are you still there? She's like, yeah, I'm here. She goes, but what are you going to do? She goes, what are you going to do about it? I've just heard you complaining about how unfair life is. Yeah. So how are you going to change it? You know, what are you going to do? I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to spend the next 25 years complaining about how unfair my career is? Or should I now take control of what I need to do? So I spent 18 months researching confidence. and self-esteem and imposter syndrome and inner critic and all those words that are thrown at us. You know, you've got imposter syndrome or your inner critic shouting loudly at you. And I started to put in practice. So I went on every course you can imagine, read almost every book.
PhD in...
yeah, basically. I felt like I went deep. I was really hyper-focused on it because I wanted to solve it.
Yeah.
And I started to put in practice some of the stuff that I was learning. And before I knew it, I was like, wow, like I feel like the world is opening up a bit more. And confidence is about taking action. Right? You're not going to learn to be more confident by waking up one morning after reading a book going, oh, wow, look, I feel really confident now.
Be more confident.
Yeah, it's just never going to happen. You have to take action. So I started to take action. So my book idea came. So I'm a confidence coach. So after learning about confidence myself, I transitioned my executive coaching because I've been a coach for over 15 years as well. I specialised in confidence coaching and helping other professionals find their value. And I started to advise and guide folks on the steps I learned and the habits I learned to become more confident. And then one of my coaches a year or so ago said, oh, I wish I could have you with me wherever I was. So I can remind myself of some of the things you're telling me. So I was like, why don't I just write? I just written my first book and I thought, why don't I write a second book, to help people understand the habits needed to build confidence throughout your career. So it's Decoding Confidence and the 7 Habits of Confident Leaders. And it's the 7 habits I learned over my time to be where I am today.
So what are some of the key takeaways without giving us
too much away?
Yeah, no spoiler alerts here.
So,
particularly for people in smaller agencies like it.
So one of the ones which I said to you, confidence is about taking action. So it's about understanding what's that bold move that you want to take, right? So one of my habits is what does boldness look like for you?
Right.
How does that show up for you? Yeah. And everyone's different, right? And everybody's got different pathways in what that looks like. So it's identifying that boldness through your purpose. So once you know, what I always say to folks is that once you know who you are and what your agency is, what is your purpose of that agency? What are you there to do? What are you there to do? What are your values? There isn't really much anyone can say or do to shake you off your kind of path because you know your strengths.
Yeah.
You know your weaknesses, you know your opportunities for growth. You're fully aware where your genius lies and you're fully aware where your genius doesn't lie. And when you're self-aware enough to know that, you'll be surprised at how far you can get. Because there'll be people who will always have a comment or an opinion about something that they don't think is right or you should do more of. But as long as you're confident in your pathway and you've taken that bold step to say, right, we're going to focus on X, Y, Z, we're not really bothered about A, B, C, then there isn't much anyone can say. And even the competition that you have around you kind of disappears into nothingness, really, because you do you. Yeah. And I do I, and it's absolutely fine. And that's one of the habits is recognizing and understanding where's my value, where does my genius lie, and who am I?
Yeah.
Because we spend so much of our lives, if you think about from the moment we're born, our guardians or parents tell us, really, don't do this, behave, don't be naughty, blah, blah, blah. Then you go to school and get reports about you. I remember being told, oh, she's quiet, she's a good girl, she doesn't say anything, and my parents rewarding me for that. So I associated reward with being quiet and not speaking up. And I spent all my early teenage and late teenage years just being a rule follower, really.
Yeah.
I never got detention at school. I never got lines. I got told off once for chewing gum and I couldn't sleep. It was ridiculous. I was such a rule follower, but I lost my voice in it all because I was so busy trying to be somebody that other people wanted me to be. And the thing with confidence is that the reason you struggle with it is because you're trying to live up to someone else's expectations of you.
Yeah.
And that's where the challenges come in.
You when we were talking earlier before the recording, you were telling me about quiet confidence and that it doesn't always mean that you're the loudest voice in the room.
No.
Can we explore that a bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of folks mistake with confidence is that if you're loud and, centre of attention and brash and, out there, then that means you must have plenty of confidence. And those are the folks I would say have the least amount of confidence. And the reason they are in that situation is because not always, but, the ones I often talk to are the ones who have to kind of cover up their insecurities or low self-esteem by being... It's a front. It's like celebrities, right? So, if you think about some of the celebs who can stand in front of 1,000 people and sing loads, songs and be entertaining, and then behind the scenes their self-esteem is so low that they're attacking themselves and abusing themselves through drugs or alcohol or mental, they've got mental health challenges. And that's because their confidence is quite high in terms of their technical ability to do good stuff, but their self-esteem is quite low. And I always say that confidence is about being self-assured enough to know that you don't need to be the centre of attention to get your point across. It's having that quiet confidence and self-assurance that you're in the right room doing the right thing, and being able to contribute in the right way. And it allows you to listen more, observe more, and contribute in a way that you don't feel that you have to know the answers to everything. Yeah. You can ask curious questions. And those are the folks that, this is why I'm speaking specifically and writing specifically about confident leaders, because they lead in a certain way that allows the organisation to thrive, because they do it without having to feel that they have to be the centre of attention and know all the answers to everything.
That's brilliant. I can't wait for the book to come out and to have a proper look at all the kind of 7 points that you get in there, because a lot of what you said resonates with me, and I'm sure with a lot of our listeners. But can we switch now to something else that we were discussing earlier around inclusion? Mm-hmm. And often that inclusion has become almost like a buzzword, or a word that we bandy around without really drilling into its meaning. So, or think of it in very narrow terms around race or gender. Yeah. Can you explain what you mean when you're talking about inclusion and where just diversity much more broadly than that?
Yeah, for me, inclusion has always been about every person that works in that organisation should feel that they're adding value in some way, and feel the sense of belonging. Whether you are an Asian woman, or if you've got neurodiversity, or if you've got disabilities, you should always feel that you are bringing the best value and you've got the right opportunities to succeed in that organisation, regardless of your background or your heritage or whatever. And what's happened recently, I would say, is that the word inclusion, diversity, equity has been weaponised under the banner of meritocracy, right? So we shouldn't be looking at representation. We should be looking at meritocracy, who's got the best qualifications to do the job. Yeah, 100%. I don't know anyone who's underrepresented or marginalised who wants to get an opportunity that they're not qualified for. Right. I'm not. Nobody's going, oh yeah, I want to be this because I've only got 3 months experience, but I can definitely be the MD of this organisation. Nobody wants
an astronaut.
Yeah, nobody wants to. No, but I'm yet to meet somebody who's like, yeah, give me that chance. Most folks want to be given equal or equitable opportunities to succeed. Yeah. And what organisations need to understand is that not everybody starts from the same starting point, and it's realising and understanding that whether you are a single parent, whether you're from a lower socioeconomic background, and I always say to organisations that I support is your training offer, for example, right? So equality is about making sure that everyone has access to the same training. Fine. Yeah. But recognising actually, can people travel to the training venue? Have they got the money to get there? Have they got the time at home? Can they leave, if they've got caring responsibilities, can they leave their children or elderly parents alone and spend 2 days at a residential? And then thinking about that and making it more equitable. So then if you can't leave your caring responsibilities, then can you make sure that you can do it online? Yeah. Or can they not do an overnight stay and maybe travel? Having a think about what does that look like for us is what inclusion is about. It's not about giving people more opportunities than others, or it's not about taking something away from someone else and giving it to someone else. It's about making that table bigger. Yeah. It's about appreciating that not everybody's going to have the same privileges as what we have. And the word privilege got dominated by white privilege, if you remember, a few years ago, and it really hit a nerve for a lot of folks. And it isn't, it is about white privilege, but it's also about educational privilege, and it's also about safety privilege. Every single human has got elements of privilege. It's about understanding what our privilege is. So for me, it's the fact that I live in a safe home. I don't have any challenges too much around financial security. I've got a safe home, got a mortgage that is being paid off. I don't have any dependents. So I can take more risks than somebody who may not have that. Yeah. So I can speak up for those who may not have feel like they can't because of their risk of their role or whatever. So for organisations, it's just about, and agencies, it's about realising actually, what am I doing to make sure that we're being as fair and equitable as we possibly can to make sure that the most marginalised individual in my organisation has just the same opportunities as the most privileged person in my organisation? And am I being fair and transparent and equitable?
So try and walk in their shoes, I guess.
Yeah, try and understand and say, like, actually, if I was a single parent, let's just take that. A single parent, I've got 3 kids under the age of 10 and I have to go and pick them up from school. Is it fair for us then to host a networking event where we'll be looking at promotional opportunities at 4:00?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No, and we get that challenge quite a lot, actually. That does strike a chord, and it's one of our kind of kickbacks to a lot of unchild-friendly networks that are training that goes on. For smaller teams and agencies, I guess you're saying it's about kind of mindset, not necessarily like where you put your budget. It's about having that conscious thought.
Yeah, it's looking through your kind of employee experience, ultimately.
Yeah.
If you live, you're up here in the north, and it isn't very diverse in terms of race, right? But it is probably around age, and it probably is around gender. So if you've got a role at Viva and you're like, right, okay, what are the applications that are coming in? If they're coming from one specific demographic and it's not addressing the demographic of the area that you're living in, then there's something that's not quite right. Right, so you're kind of like, okay, we're not getting as many female applicants as we'd like, or male applicants as much as we'd like. So what do we need to do to kind of change the language that we might be using? Do we need to kind of maybe advertise this role in a community centre, or if it's an internship, do we need to go to certain schools and different schools? Same with like private and public education, right? Like how are we communicating and talking about the opportunities that are available? I will always say to folks, you have to be sensible. Yeah. Right, you have to look at the demographics that are surrounding you. I don't expect anyone from the back end of Cumbria, Rawtenstall, to have 50% underrepresented people from a race perspective. No. But I will probably expect your organisation to have female and male representation, non-binary representation, based on the demographics of the area that you're living in.
Yeah. No, that seems fair. Tell us about CommsRebel and how that started and what it does.
So CommsRebel, I suppose, was my way of pushing back on the years I lived a very structured life. I said to you before, I never got in trouble for anything.
Yes.
And I realised, as I hit my mid-30s, that I'd spent so much of my time conforming to what people expected me to be, that it wasn't really getting me where I wanted to go. So I decided that I wanted to become a little bit of a rule breaker. Yeah. And CommsRebel came from my love of being curious and questioning status quo. And I realised that organisations want to do things differently and make a difference in the way they do, campaigns and comms and all that. But it's that Einstein quote, right? You expect to do the same thing over and over again, but not making the change is a sign of insanity. Yeah. And I realised that if you truly want to make a difference in the organisations that you work in, then you're going to have to look at the way you're working and maybe break a few rules, take some risks and be a bit different. And that's where Rebel came from. And I remember when I first socialised it out there, a few folks were a bit like, ooh, I don't know many organisations are going to work with a rebel. I said, well, you know what, that's fine. There'll be organisations that will find it uncomfortable to work with someone called a rebel. But I want to attract the organisations that are ready for change and are ready to take action. And that's what I promised myself. And I said to you before about finding that purpose. Yeah. And the thing about owning agencies and consultancies is that you can't be everyone's cup of tea, otherwise you'll be a mug, right? Say that all the time.
I like that.
You can't be. No. And you'll spend a lot of your time trying to, in the early days especially, trying to find your way. You're looking at your competitors, you're looking at what the market wants. And you end up kind of doing what you were doing before, but slightly differently. And I realised if I wanted to make a difference, I had to be different.
Yeah.
And I started CommsRebel in January 2020. And then 9 weeks later, the pandemic hit.
Nice.
And it was a test of that resilience I spoke to you about earlier, about, growing up in the North. And if I hadn't had, I suppose, faced some of the adversity I'd faced in my early life, I probably would have rang my old boss up and said, like I was being a bit cocky, like I was going off, starting my own business. Can I now have my old job back? But I stopped myself doing that, even though there was so much pressure around me from family and friends who were like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Like, you've left a really good, well-paid job to do this. Like, we're now 3 months after the pandemic and you've literally brought in about 300 quid. Like, are you sure? I was like, do you know what? It's now or never. Yeah. Like, if I can't make it work during a pandemic, then I don't think I'll be able to make it work post-pandemic. So you just have to knuckle down and crack on and be the rebel, right? And take those risks. That's what I ended up doing.
Wow. So what is it you do then?
So I'm an internal communication and employee experience consultancy. So we work with organisations to help them colleagues thrive through good, effective communication. So that's looking from strategy all the way down to tactics, to helping leaders recognise what they need to do to build more inclusion. So people are not just surviving, they're thriving in the workplace. So we cover a range of things, from reviews to skills audits to comms strategies to employee experience structures to employee value propositions, and helping people understand what's missing for us.
Yeah.
Like today I did a LinkedIn post because I've read so many people talk about their horrible experiences of recruitment when they've been attracted and recruitment policies, recruitment processes, sorry. And I'm like, where are comms? Yeah. Like, how do people not realise that the employee experience starts at attraction? So as soon as somebody sees a job at your organisation, it starts from that moment. Yeah. And the employee value proposition and the branding element, the advocacy bit starts from then. Because people will go on to Glassdoor and Glassdoor and other places, or even LinkedIn, and slag. I mean, I saw this one person today talk about really poor experience of a large organisation, and underneath, people actually tagged organisations where they'd had really poor experience. And you read some of that and you go, I'm going to be a little bit careful about wasting too much. I don't want to spend 8 hours of my life being interviewed and then being ghosted by XYZ. No,
that's really interesting. I was out with some friends and they were talking about something similar from a different perspective, saying that the video and the website and the process was really glossy and slick, but when they got in there, the job itself was nothing like what had been promised. And he said, I felt like I'd been catfished. It's there is a comms element to that. Definitely. Are we overselling what people might end up doing?
And they end up leaving though. And if you don't get internal comms involved from the day dot and helping you tell your employees' stories through their own voices and be honest and realistic about expectations, people start like that colleague, and they'll be like, what the hell is this? I didn't sign up for this. And they'll be looking for a new job within nobody's got the loyalty that you would expect them to have what was 15 years ago, where you're like, I look really bad on my CV if I leave within 6 months. Nobody cares now. Like, it's not hitting my values, so I'm off. And cost-wise, it's thousands of pounds in recruitment and then the onboarding and then retaining them. Thousands of pounds.
So how's the agency life going there, the CommsRebel going?
I mean, it's like feast or famine, isn't it, Tony? Let's be honest. I get DMs every day about people going, I really want to set my own business up. I've seen, like, you seem to be living the dream. I'm like, God, there's also nightmares involved in the dream, like always. I said, and I will never discourage anybody for wanting to take the chance of setting up their own agency consultancy. But I will always say, if you have got dependents and you've got debts and you need a regular income coming in without fail, then consider whether this is the right thing for you or not, because the financial element, which not many people talk about, is the one thing that will completely screw you over.
Yeah.
And it'll stop you taking those risks. It'll stop you living confidently, and it'll stop you being bold in the decisions that you have to make as a business owner. And like I said to you earlier, I had the privilege. I saved up 6 months' worth of salary to be able to do this. Well, I mean, no one knew the pandemic was coming, to be honest. But I took the risks because I knew if I failed, it wouldn't impact anyone else.
Yeah.
It would just impact me. So it is feast or famine, but I love it, and I am unemployable now. I know that. I think all of us are, right? Anyone who starts their own agency and stuff it'll be as hard work to go back in-house and work for somebody else. But I love it, and I wouldn't change it for anything, really. I love the creativity it brings, the different opportunities that comes your way. Writing books, being on podcasts, being on stage, being the president. Yeah. There's so many opportunities that come your way. But I will say to folks who are listening, who are a bit like, if you're an agency owner and you're listening, you're like, oh my God, things are tough. We get it.
Yeah.
But be rest assured you're not alone.
Yeah.
And if you do feel that things are tough and you feel a bit lonely, then get in touch with others. And either through the CIPR network or through other networks that you have, but speak about it.
Yeah.
Don't keep it to yourself, because it's really difficult to think clearly when it's all contained within you. And if you're a person who's working in house and hates their job and thinks actually independent work might be my thing, then investigate it, but have conversations with individuals about the job market, because it is hard. Right now, it's quite tough. Yeah. And because the organisations are not offering flexibility as much as they used to, during the pandemic, it's quite flexible, and they're asking folks to go in 3 days and 4 days a week. It's not suiting people's lifestyle, so they're going down the I'll just work for myself route, which I've seen a lot of people do that and then have real challenges and then struggle to get back in the job market. So consider it, think about it, and talk to others who have gone there and done that, because you need to make that decision with a kind of open
very clear-sighted. I think it's really good advice. A friend of mine who's not in the industry, he's in the legal profession. The government always used to bang the drum for set up your own business and want to create an enterprise society and so on. And he said they should be sending out a government health warning with these as well, because it's really tough running your own, solicitor's practice or whatever. That it can be. It's not all. I think the business world is portrayed quite badly in the media sometimes as kind of fat cats and so on. And
It's
the
not,
long days and long nights and the dramas.
Yeah. Well, most of the businesses are small enterprises, right? So people always say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky to be working for yourself." I'm like, you never switch off as a consultancy or as an agency owner ever, as much as you want to. Yeah. There's always something in the back of your mind like, oh, I've got that pitch to do, got a proposal to write, business, I'm not getting leads in, so I probably need to be a little bit more visible, X, Y, and Z. Or
you're either too busy or you're not busy
feast
enough.
Feast or famine. Feast or famine. I say that all the time.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So we're wrapping up now, but what advice would you give a young comms professional, or even your younger self who is starting off in the industry? What would you tell them today, do you think?
I'll go back to my favourite quote is, you can't be everyone's cup of tea, otherwise you'd be a mug. It's really important that you follow advice of people that have been there and are living their values well. There's lots of folks, especially in the social media world we're in, that try and sell the dream. And try and, pretend that this is how they did it, whatever, and they don't really think about the help that they ask for. A lot of folks are quite reluctant to talk about help, which I find quite interesting. As mentioned, Catherine, but I've had mentors and coaches throughout my career. And if it wasn't for them, I probably, again, wouldn't be here. So if you're a young professional, don't think you have to do this on your own. No. Take the risk and DM somebody on LinkedIn and say, are you looking for a mentee? And 9 out of 10 times I might come back and say no, like we're busy. I have to admit I do get requests and stuff, and I can't always do them. But it's worth putting yourself out there and asking, and be quite. The other thing I will always say to young professionals is experiment and try things out. Like, you don't know until you tried it. Like, go and give it a go, and don't fear it too much about what will look like on my CV and what if this. You're not a tree. You're not rooted anywhere. You can actually get up and move. And you need to experiment and try things out and not fear saying, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go and try something else. Or I'm going to go and ask this person if I can get an opportunity there or offer, I love the stories of those folks who are really creative about how they may pitch themselves into organisations with the cleverness of it. You don't always have to be like that, but don't fear taking risks.
No, I think that's really good advice. I've been doing this 23 years now, but I've got a mentee that I reached out to like a couple of years ago. Somebody who I've known off and on over the years, and they live at the far end of the country, but have quite a top level job, and I was amazed that they would find time for me. But and it's a really useful relationship.
Yeah.
It gets me out of this little bubble and lift my head up. And it's interesting to hear that my problems here and challenges are replicated industry wide. So I think that's really
and what I will say about asking for a mentor actually is that don't be like hammering everybody.
No.
Be mindful and be the best ones for me are the ones who know me.
Yes.
And be like, oh well, I loved what you said about XYZ, or I heard you speaking at this event and you really resonated with me, and this is what I took away from that. Because the mentor-mentee relationship has to be led by the mentee. So you have to be ready to be mentored. Because the last thing a mentor will ever want to do is mentor somebody who's not willing to listen.
Yes.
So just recognise that in yourself and be ready for kind of having advice and guidance throughout your kind of early career.
No, that's good. So one final question. What's your one hope for the future for the industry, particularly for us folks outside the bubble?
One of the things I'm keen to work on in my year is recognising the importance of things like chartership and getting us into those boardrooms where we often are not invited. To be honest, we're seen as the kind of nice to have sometimes rather than the must have. And I want folks to feel that career confidence in themselves to be able to push their leaders or clients, whoever, and say, we need to be in this conversation. Yeah. And this is what we offer. And the only way we can really do that is building that career confidence. And I believe that chartership is a great opportunity from the CIPR to be able to do that well, because it's the only membership institution that can offer chartership. So that's my one, like being seen just as important as legal, finance are. I want PR folks to have that seat, and I want them and comms people to have that seat at a strategic leadership level. I also want us to remember that the talent that exists is also outside of London. Yeah. And when folks are looking for opportunities, to think about that when they're putting the job adverts out there. I've seen folks say you need to travel into the office 4 days a week. Do you really? Have a think about actually what talent are we missing out on by insisting that somebody comes and sits on Teams all day in the office. I'm not saying that office work isn't important. I do believe that people should go into the office occasionally and meet others and connect and build that relationship. That's critical for success, in my opinion. But does it have to be so rigid? Yeah. Can you offer the flexibility? Can you offer compensation for folks who may be travelling into London, maybe 3 days a month or 4 days a month, and open up your bandwidth a bit more, so you're appreciating the fact that there are talented communications and public relations folks who can offer so much more than just people from a zone 1 to 3.
Brilliant. That's a fantastic place to end it. So, Advita, thanks so much for coming in to chat to us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real-world stories from the PR frontlines.